He was too much for every woman until she took all of him. Hi, my beautiful family. I speak to you today with a heart full of love, but also with truth. Our channel is built on your strength, your love, and your support. Every story I write is written with tears, with passion, and with prayer for each one of you. But my family, I see the channel going down because many forget to like, many forget to comment. It hurts me because it feels like my hard work is left unseen. I ask you today, not just as a creator, but as your brother who truly loves you, please, whenever you watch, give your love back. A simple like, a simple comment keeps this family alive, keeps our light shining, and gives me the power to bring you more and more beautiful stories. May God bless every woman in this family with honor, with dignity, and with unshakable strength. May every man be blessed with wisdom and respect. May our children rise higher than mountains, and may every home be filled with endless love and peace. Amen. If your heart is true, write present. If your love is real, write in the comment where you're watching from. Picture a man at the end of himself, once draped in designer suits, now hunched over a chipped bar stool. His phone sits silent. The endless stream of attention dried up to nothing. Former friends cross the street to avoid him. Employers won't even return his emails. And the women, oh, the women he once boasted about collecting like trophies, they've moved on, stronger than ever. This wasn't an accident. This was design. Ethan had always believed he was untouchable, a master of charm, a man too much for any one woman to handle. And for a long time, he was right. Women fell hard, blinded by his grin, his carefully rehearsed compliments, the magnetic pull of his confidence. He swept them off their feet, only to grind them down until they barely recognized themselves. Then, when they were nothing but shadows, he'd toss them aside and laugh about it over drinks. I know you've probably met someone like him. The type who makes manipulation look like an art form. And most people walk away shaking their heads, saying, well, that's just who he is. But this isn't about Ethan getting away with it. This is about the one woman who refused to be another casualty in his little collection. Her name was Marissa, and she wasn't dazzled by his smoke and mirrors. She was quiet, thoughtful, patient in a way Ethan didn't even notice at first. He thought he was writing her story another chapter, another heartbroken footnote. What he didn't realize was that Marissa wasn't a page in his book. She was holding the pen. And when Ethan finally bragged, as he always did, that no woman could handle all of him, he had no idea those words would become his undoing, because Marissa didn't just handle him, she dismantled him, piece by arrogant piece. Now before I walk you through how she turned his world upside down, let me pause. If you're the kind of person who lives for poetic justice, the kind that isn't just served, but chilled, plated, and garnished with irony, hit that subscribe button. These stories take hours to research, script, and edit, and your support makes it possible for us to keep serving up justice, one tale at a time, all right. You've seen Ethan at rock bottom. You know the type of man he was. Now, let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning, to when Ethan still thought he was untouchable. And Marissa was just another name on his list, because what happened next? Oh, he never saw it coming. Ethan was the kind of man people noticed the moment he walked into a room. Not because he was particularly unique. Plenty of guys had his height, his expensive watch, his practiced smile. But Ethan carried himself like the world was his stage, and everyone else was just lucky to be in the audience. He had a reputation, a good one, if you only skimmed the surface. To strangers, he was charming. To acquaintances, he was fun. But to the women who had loved him, He was a storm they didn't see coming until their lives were already in pieces. Ethan's dating cycle was as predictable as a bad soap opera. Step 1. Flood you with attention. Lavish compliments, over-the-top dates, constant texts. He'd make you feel like you were the only person in the world. The kind of attention every OMCOM promises but reality rarely delivers. Then came step 2. The pulling back. The jokes that weren't jokes. You're too sensitive. Don't be dramatic. Relax. It's not a big deal. That was Ethan's specialty, making women doubt themselves. He called it testing their strength. I call it gaslighting with a green. One of his EXCs once told me she barely recognized herself by the time it was over. She started as this confident, outgoing woman who lit up every room. By the end, she was walking on eggshells, apologizing for things she didn't even do. And Ethan, he told people she was too emotional and couldn't keep up with him. That line, "No woman can keep up with me," it was practically his catchphrase. He'd drop it into conversations like a badge of honor, as though being unbearable was something to brag about. At parties, after a couple of drinks, he'd lean back, smirk, and say, "I'm just too much." That's why women fall apart. His buddies would laugh. The women who overheard would roll their eyes. But Ethan, he believed every word. Now, enter Marissa. She met Ethan the way many did at a mutual friend's gathering. He zeroed in on her like a hunter spotting prey. Same tactics as always. The charm switch flipped on. The compliments rolled in. The attention was immediate and overwhelming. But here's the thing about Marissa. She didn't give him the reaction he expected. Where most women melted under that spotlight, Marissa simply smiled. She listened. She asked questions but never overshared. And when Ethan tried his usual over-the-top gestures, grand promises, extravagant dates, she thanked him politely, but never swooned. It wasn't that she didn't notice his charm. She did, but she also noticed the cracks. The way his eyes darted when someone else was speaking, always calculating when to jump back in. The way his compliments sometimes felt rehearsed, as if he'd said the exact same words to a dozen other women. The way he bragged about his exhausting energy like it was a gift instead of a warning. Ethan thought Marissa was just playing hard to get. To him, every woman was a puzzle, and patience was the key to solving it. He told his friends she was different, which in Ethan's speak meant she was resisting his script longer than usual. But Marissa wasn't resisting. She was studying. She was taking notes, not on paper, but in silence, in the way she held her gaze a bit too long when he lied, in the way she let him talk himself in circles without interruption. She didn't challenge him directly. She didn't roll her eyes or call him out. Instead, she gave him just enough rope to keep talking, and talking, and talking. Ethan mistook her stillness for submission. He believed he was playing her. What he didn't realize was that Marissa had already started mapping the rules of his game, one smart remark at a time, because here's the thing. When someone thinks they're untouchable, they leave themselves wide open. And Ethan, he was too busy admiring his own reflection to notice that the ground beneath him was already starting to crack. He thought he was the king, the man no one could handle. But a king who rules nothing is just a fool in a crown. And Marissa, she was already preparing to take that crown off his head quietly, patiently, piece by piece. Have you ever met someone who thought they were untouchable? What happened to them? It didn't take long before Ethan's polished act began to slip. That's the thing about people who thrive on image eventually. The cracks show. And Marissa, she noticed every single one. At first, it was the little inconsistencies. He'd swear he was stuck at the office late, but photos from a friend's Instagram would show him at a rooftop bar. He'd claim he hated drama, but then launch into a 20-minute rant about how all his exes were crazy and obsessed with him. He'd brag about being honest to a fault, then conveniently forget details that didn't flatter him. Most people would brush those off, excuse them as quirks. But Marissa had sharp ears and sharper instincts. She wasn't just hearing his words, she was cataloging them, building a pattern. And the pattern was ugly. Friends saw it too. One night, over coffee, her closest friend leaned in and said, "Marissa, he'll cheer you up, just like the others." "Don't think you're the exception," another friend was more blunt. "You can't fix a man who doesn't think he's broken. Anyone else might have listened, cut their losses, walked away." But Marissa didn't. Not because she was naive. Quite the opposite. She understood something most people didn't. You can't beat someone like Ethan by storming out the door. He'd just call you weak, add your name to his list, and move on. No. The way to dismantle someone like Ethan was to stay silent, stay calm, and let him keep talking himself into his own distraction. So that's exactly what she did. She played along, smiled when he bragged, nodded when he lied, pretended not to notice when he contradicted himself. Ethan mistook her silence for admiration, her patience for submission. And the more he thought he had her wrapped around his finger, the bolder he became. One night at a dinner party, Ethan launched into his usual routine. He leaned back in his chair, drink in hand, and told the table, "Most women, they can't handle me. Too emotional, too fragile. Marissa here, she's different. She knows I'm a lot to deal with, but she keeps up." Marissa smiled politely, saying nothing. Inside, though, she was filing it away. Every insult disguised as a compliment. Every boast disguised as truth. It was ammunition, waiting for the right moment. Another time, he slipped up in front of her. He was scrolling through his phone, smirking at a text, and when she casually asked who it was, he shrugged. Just a friend. A minute later, he let it slip. She gets jealous easily. Most girlfriends would have pressed him, demanded answers, started a fight. But Marissa didn't flinch. She just tilted her head, studying him like a scientist examining a specimen. Then she let it go. Or at least, that's what he thought. The silence was her weapon, and Ethan was too arrogant to realize he was being disarmed in real time. As weeks turned into months, his mask continued to slip. He bragged louder, lied sloppier, dismissed her kindness as weakness, and every time, Marissa gave him nothing. No confrontation, no tears, just that steady, unreadable smile. Ethan loved it. He told his friends, "She's the easiest relationship I've ever had. No drama. She just takes it." But here's what he didn't understand. She wasn't taking it. She was storing it. Like a fort, collecting every careless word, every betrayal, every piece of the puzzle he handed her. And when the vault finally opened, he wouldn't just lose control. He'd lose everything because Ethan believed he was in control of the game. What he didn't realize was that Marissa had already memorized the rulebook. She wasn't reacting, she was planning. And every day she stayed, every lie she let slide, was another step closer to the inevitable. So let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have walked away the moment you saw the cracks? Or would you have stayed quiet, just long enough to see how far someone like Ethan would fall? Would you walk away immediately? Or stay quiet and watch how far someone like Ethan goes? Marissa didn't fight Ethan's lies. She didn't try to correct him. She didn't storm out or slam doors. Instead, she started doing something far more dangerous. She fed his ego, not with wide-eyed admiration or clingy devotion. Ethan had already seen enough of that. No, Marissa's version was quieter, subtler. She gave him just enough encouragement to push himself further, just enough rope to tangle his own feet, Take the dinner with her coworkers, for example. Ethan wasn't invited, at least not initially. But Marissa mentioned it casually, knowing he hated being left out of anything that might spotlight him. "It's just a small thing," she said, almost dismissively. Predictably, Ethan insisted on coming, and that night, he couldn't help himself. Surrounded by professionals who actually knew what they were talking about, he launched into one of his monologues. "I've always been the kind of guy who works harder, plays harder, lives bigger. Honestly, most people can't keep up. That's why I outgrow them." Her coworkers exchanged glances. A couple hid their laughter behind their glasses. Marissa said nothing. She just let him keep talking, letting his arrogance fill the silence until it became unbearable. Later, when Ethan bragged about how impressed everyone must have been, Marissa only smiled. "You really do have a way with words," she murmured. He took it as praise. In reality, every person at that table now saw him for exactly who he was. Another time, Marissa set a smaller trap. She mentioned a story Ethan had told her months earlier about a business deal he claimed to have closed. Except this time, she changed a detail. Just one. She brought it up casually in front of friends. "Didn't you say it was in Chicago?" she asked sweetly, though she knew he'd originally said New York without missing a beat. Ethan agreed. "Yeah, Chicago." "That's right." Her friends caught the inconsistency immediately. Marissa didn't point it out. She didn't need to. The seed was planted. Ethan lied easily, and often It was like this again and again. Little setups, tiny nudges. She never forced him into anything, she simply opened the door and let him walk through it. And every time he did, his mask slipped a little more. Ethan, of course, thought he was winning. He believed her silence was admiration. He mistook her patience for awe. The truth, every time he thought he'd won, she had already taken another piece from him. There was one night that summed it all up. They were at a friend's engagement party, standing with a group swapping funny stories. Ethan, never able to resist the spotlight, interrupted with one of his legendary tales about how every girlfriend he'd had fallen apart trying to keep up with him. Too emotional. He laughed. "Too needy. I'm just a lot to handle, you know." The group went quiet. The laughter that usually followed his boasts didn't come. Marissa only sipped her drink, ice calm, almost bored. She didn't defend him. She didn't laugh with him. She let the weight of his words hang heavy in the air, until he finally realized no one else found it charming. Later, Ethan complained, "Why didn't you back me up?" Marissa tilted her head. "You didn't need me to. You already made your point." That response silenced him more than an argument ever could. The beauty of Marissa's strategy was its invisibility. On the surface, she was the perfect girlfriend, supportive, quiet, never confrontational. To Ethan, she was proof of his greatness. To everyone else, she was proof of his downfall. Because when a man insists on showing the world who he really is, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is let him. Ethan thought the game was his to win. He thought Marissa was just another admirer, holding onto his every word. What he didn't see was the quiet calculation behind her eyes. She wasn't trying to keep up with him. She was waiting, watching, and setting the bait he couldn't resist. Have you ever kept quiet just long enough for someone to show their true colors? Ethan's downfall didn't start with a bang. It started with a whisper. A coworker who rolled their eyes one too many times. A friend who stopped returning calls. A casual comment at a party. "Oh, that's just Ethan being Ethan." At first, he brushed it off. He always did. He'd built his entire image on being untouchable, larger than life. The guy nobody could pin down. A little criticism, please. It only made him feel more important, but whispers spread. And the thing about whispers, once they're out there, they don't go back in. The first crack appeared at work. Ethan had always been the guy who talked a bigger game than he played. Loud in meetings, full of vision, short on follow-through. For years, he coasted because people mistook confidence for competence. Then came the quarterly presentation. He strutted into that conference room with his usual swagger, convinced he'd dazzle the board. But this time, nobody seemed impressed. Midway through, one of his supervisors interrupted. "Ethan, that data doesn't match the numbers you sent last month." The room went silent. Ethan stammered, shuffled papers, tried to charm his way out. Marissa sat in the back, silent, watching. She didn't expose him. She didn't need to. His contradictions exposed themselves. By the end of that week, he wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was the guy everyone double-checked, the one whispered about in hallways, the coworker you didn't trust with the big projects, social life. That went next. Ethan had always prided himself on being the center of attention, telling stories that made him seem more successful, more wanted, more everything. But the cracks from those little inconsistencies Marissa had let slip earlier, they started spreading. At a friend's barbecue, someone asked about his so-called business trip to Chicago. Another friend piped up, "Wait, didn't you say it was New York?" Laughter rippled. Not cruel, not loud, but enough. Ethan turned red, snapped something about people misremembering, but the damage was done. His stories, once gospel, now felt flimsy, and the more he tried to defend himself, the more pathetic he sounded. The real blow came online. It started small. A thread on social media. Someone posted, "Anyone else notice how Ethan always changes his story?" People piled on with examples. Times he bragged about things that never happened. Times he contradicted himself. Times he treated women badly and called it being honest. Screenshots appeared. Old texts. Humble brags that aged into lies. Within days, Ethan's name wasn't associated with charisma anymore. It was associated with red flags. And through it all, Marissa, she was always nearby, smiling softly, asking harmless questions at just the right time, never accusing, never pointing fingers, just listening when friends whispered to her. She didn't rush to spill. She simply tilted her head, gave a thoughtful hum. It was enough. People drew their own conclusions. One night, after another awkward evening where his jokes landed flat, Ethan turned to her, frustrated. "Why are people acting so weird around me lately?" Marissa's expression was all innocence. "I don't know, Ethan. Maybe they just don't get you like I do." And he believed her. Because of course he did. His ego needed it. But the more he fought to hold onto his image, the worse he looked. He posted defensive rants online, which only fueled the fire. "Haters gonna hate," he wrote, trying to sound unbothered. But his friends screenshotted the posts, sharing them with mocking captions. At work, he doubled down, interrupting colleagues even more, taking credit for ideas that weren't his. That backfired spectacularly when one manager snapped in front of everyone, "Ethan, stop. We know who did the real work." For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't have the room, and still, he couldn't see it. He told himself it was jealousy, that people couldn't handle his confidence, his energy, his truth. He didn't realize the truth had already caught up with him, and Marissa had quietly guided it there, step by step. Because here's the thing about people like Ethan. Their arrogance is both armor and weakness. The more he flexed, the more brittle he became. And every situation Marissa placed him in, every silence she held, it chipped away, one night. After losing yet another argument with friends who had simply stopped caring, Ethan raged in private. "Why are they all against me? What did I even do?" Marissa just touched his arm, her voice calm. Maybe it's not them, Ethan. Maybe it's you. He laughed, sharp and defensive. You don't mean that. But the look in her eyes said otherwise. Why now? His kingdom was rubble, the job hanging by a thread, friendships reduced to a few petty invites, reputation torn apart online, piece by piece, in posts he couldn't scrub no matter how many times he reported them, and through it all, Marissa stayed, not as his savior, not as his cheerleader, but as the quiet witness to his unraveling. Ethan thought he was invincible, but in the end, he was undone not by betrayal, not by sabotage, but by himself. Marissa simply gave him the stage, and he set himself on fire. What's your favorite example of karma catching up with someone? The moment finally came when Ethan realized he wasn't the predator anymore. He was the predator. It didn't happen in one explosive scene. It was more like waking up to find the walls had already closed in, and there was no way out. The calls had stopped. His so-called friends, the ones who used to laugh at his stories and hang off his every word, they weren't answering anymore. Invitations dried up. Group chats carried on without him. Even the people he thought were too loyal to ever cut him off quietly slipped away. And the women, oh, the women. His exes began speaking up. Not just one or two, but many. Stories spread like wildfire online. Screenshots, receipts, whispered testimonies that now had an eager audience. Every charming line he thought had been forgotten resurfaced like evidence in a trial. And this time, nobody laughed it off. Nobody excused him. Even at work, colleagues who once tolerated him now avoided eye contact. They knew. They didn't need details. They could smell the desperation on him, hear the cracks in his voice. Ethan, who once strutted through offices like he owned the place, now felt like a ghost haunting his own life. And yet, through all of this, Marissa stayed. Or rather, she appeared to stay, sitting across from him at dinners that had grown awkwardly quiet, smiling politely when he launched into another attempt at charm, his jokes falling flat. She was there, yes, but she was no longer with him. That drove him crazy, because Ethan had built his entire identity on control. If he couldn't hold onto Marissa, if she slipped through his fingers like the others, what did that make him? So he tried something new. He tried pity. One night, his voice cracked as he leaned across the table. Marissa, you can't leave me now. Not after everything. Everyone's turning against me. You're all I've got left. His eyes were red, his smile shaky. For the first time in his life, the mask was gone, but Marissa didn't flinch. She sipped her wine, calm as ever, and said nothing. Silence once again, her sharpest weapon. Ethan grew desperate. You knew what people were saying about me, didn't you? His tone sharpened. You didn't defend me. You let them believe it. He stopped himself, but the word was already out. Betrayed me. The accusation hung in the air. Marissa tilted her head, eyes steady, and spoke for the first time that evening in more than a whisper. Her voice was soft, but it cut sharper than any scream could. Betrayal, Ethan. You really think I betrayed you? He sputtered. I trusted you. I thought you were different. You were supposed to be on my side. And here was the turning point. The moment the hunter realized the trap had been sprung long before he ever sensed danger, Marissa set her glass down, folded her hands, and leaned just close enough for him to hear every word. You always said no woman could handle all of you. Her pause was deliberate, a knife sliding into place. Looks like you were right because I took all of you. It was quiet after that. The kind of silence that doesn't leave room for argument. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. What could he say? The truth sat in front of him, wearing a calm smile. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't exposed him in some messy public scene. She didn't need to. His life was already in ruins, and she'd been there every step of the way watching, guiding, letting him bury himself deeper. The predator was gone. All that remained was a man stripped bare of the only things he valued: power, reputation, and control. And Marissa, she wasn't angry. She wasn't vindictive. She was simply done. She stood, collected her bag, and walked away without a backward glance. For Ethan, that was the real betrayal. Not the whispers, not the lost friends, not the ruined career. It was her quiet, unshakable choice to leave him with nothing. It's funny, isn't it? How someone can spend years believing they're untouchable, only to realize they've been unraveling by their own hand the entire time. Marissa didn't destroy Ethan. She simply let him be himself, loud, careless, arrogant, and gave the world the space to finally see him clearly. And when he begged for her loyalty, she gave him the only truth he could never spin: that she hadn't just handled him. She dismantled him, piece by piece. Do you think Marissa was too harsh or exactly right? Ethan always thought the worst thing that could happen to him was losing a woman. He was wrong. The real collapse came when everything else followed. His career? Gone. Once, he strutted through office hallways like the golden boy, always ready with a joke, a compliment, a story that made him seem larger than life. But when the stories about him spread, when his EXCs began comparing notes, that confidence turned toxic. Clients pulled out. Projects were reassigned. Eventually, his boss handed him a box and told him to clear his desk. And just like that, the man who once bragged about being too much for anyone to handle couldn't even handle his own paycheck. Friendships? Non-existent. The same crowd that once cheered his antics now ghosted him. Group chats went silent. He'd see their photos, online gatherings, parties, weekends away, and his name wasn't anywhere near the invite list, and his reputation as a ladies' man reduced to a punchline. Women swapped stories, not in whispers, but openly, laughing at the recycled lines he thought were genius. He became less of a threat and more of a warning label. Do not touch. Serial liar. Proceed with caution. But here's the cruelest part. For the first time in his life, Ethan was forced to sit with himself. No distractions, no admirers, just silence. And he hated it. Because under all the charm, all the bravado, there was nothing solid. Just a hollow man who had built his entire identity on validation he no longer had. And Marissa, she didn't gloat. She didn't scream. She didn't post some victory thread online. She simply walked away, calm, collected, free. Her revenge wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. She knew his downfall was already in motion, and her silence only sped the weight of it. Ethan wanted drama, a fight he could twist into his narrative, but she refused to play that part, and that's what crushed him most of all, because without her reaction, without her energy, he had nothing left to feed on. Sometimes the deepest revenge isn't fire, it's silence. And for Ethan, silence was the one thing he could never conquer. Have you ever seen someone destroy themselves without you lifting a finger? What happened? Marissa never saw herself as the woman who beat Ethan. That was never the point. When she finally walked away, it wasn't with a smirk or a victory lap. It was with peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you didn't just survive someone, you outgrew them. She rebuilt, but not loudly. Her life filled with small, steady joys. Coffee with friends who actually cared. Work she loved without apology. Nights spent laughing, unbothered. Free of the constant push and pull of a man who thrived on control. Because that's the thing about surviving someone like Ethan. You don't need fireworks to feel whole again. You need space. And Marissa gave herself that gift. Ethan, on the other hand, His name lingered like smoke from a burned-out match. People remembered him, yes, but not the way he wanted. He wasn't the man who had it all. He was the man who lasted all. Colleagues recalled his arrogance. EXCs remembered the gaslighting. Friends told stories with a shake of the head. Yeah, we should have seen it coming. His reputation didn't vanish, it rotted piece by piece, until the only thing left was cautionary tale. And the irony. He'd spent years bragging no woman could handle all of him. Yet in the end, it wasn't a woman's weakness that defined him. It was his own. Marissa didn't check in on him. She didn't stalk his socials or ask mutual friends for updates. She didn't need to, because the truth was simple. She had already won. Not by destroying him, but by refusing to let him define her. Ethan's world shrank. Hers expanded. And maybe that's the part people miss when they hear revenge. It doesn't always look like scorched earth or dramatic takedowns. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your head high, leaving someone to sit in the ruins they built for themselves. Revenge isn't always about destruction. It's about reclaiming power. About choosing dignity when someone tried to strip it from you. It's about leaving them with exactly what they gave the world. And for Ethan, that was nothing. What's your definition of real revenge, ruin, or peace? Ethan's story didn't end in fire or fury. It ended in silence. His career collapsed. His charm curdled into parody, and the people who once circled him now barely spoke his name. Marissa's story, though, it was never about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about freedom. She walked away lighter, unbothered, with no need to look back. And honestly, that's the part that stays with me. Because the real satisfaction isn't just watching someone fall. It's seeing the person they try to break rise, calm and whole. Sometimes the sharpest justice isn't loud at all. It's quiet. It's measured. It's leaving someone to drown in the weight of their own choices. And Ethan, he finally had to face the one person he could never outsmart himself. If you found this story as cathartic as I did, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. We spend hours crafting these scripts and stories, and your support helps us keep serving justice story by story.so. Tell me, was Marissa too harsh? Or exactly right?